ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदयन्तोऽस्ति अभद्राणि विदुनोति सहस्रतं। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठकी। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21. Oh, Chapter 23, right, Prabhu? Chapter 23, verses 21. Let me just go to my screen. Okay, verse to 23. Verse 21. Deham vipani khali चेतनादिकं पत्यो प्रवृत्य दयित्स चत्मना आलक्ष्य किंचित च विलाप्य सति चित्तम अथो पदयत् आद्रि सनौनि synonym deham body vipanna completely failing akhila all chetana feeling adhikam symptoms patyu of her husband Pratyava, the word, Daitasya of the merciful, Cha Atmana also of herself, Alaksha by seeing, Kinchit very little, Cha and Vilapya lamenting, Sa she, Sati the chaste, Chitam unto the fire, Atha now, Aropayat placed, Adri hill, Sanavni on the top. Translation. When Queen Archie saw her husband, who had been so merciful to her and the earth, no longer showed symptoms of life, she lamented for a little while and then built a fiery pyre on top of a hill and placed the body of her husband on it. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. After seeing all the life symptoms in her husband stop, the queen lamented for a while. The word kinchit means for a little while. The queen was completely aware that her husband was not dead, although the symptoms of life, action, intelligence, and sense perception had ceased. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.13, Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. When a living entity transfers from one body to another, a process generally known as death, a sane man does not lament, for he knows that the living entity is not dead, but it is simply transferred from one body to another. The queen should have been afraid of being alone in the forest with the body of her husband. But since she was a great wife of a great personality, she lamented for a while, but immediately understood that she had many duties to perform. Thus, instead of wasting her time in lamentation, she immediately prepared a fiery pyre on top of a hill and then placed the body of her husband on it to be burned. Maharaja Prithu is described here as Daita, for not only he was the king of the earth, but he treated the earth as his protected child. Similarly, he protected his wife also. It was the duty of the king to give protection to everyone, especially to the earth or land which he ruled, as well as the citizens and his family members. Since Prithu Maharaj was a perfect king, he gave protection to everyone, and therefore he is described as Daita. Next, verse 22. Vidaya krityam ridhani jalaputta Datvodakam bhartur udara karmana Natva divistam strida Stripatreya Vivesha Vahanim Dhyayati Bhartpudo. Synonym. Vidaya executing, Kritayam the regulative function, Hridani the water of the river, Jala Apluta taking bath completely, Datva Udakam offering oblations of water, Bhartu of her husband, Udara Karmana who was so liberal, Natva offering obeisances, Devi Sthan situated in the sky, Tridashan the 30 million demigods, three times, Paritya circumambulating, Vivesha entered, Vanim the fire, Dhyayati while thinking of Bhatr of her husband, Padaut the two lotus feet. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. After this, the queen executed the necessary funerary functions and offered oblations of water. After bathing in the river, she offered obeisances to various demigods situated in the sky in the different planetary systems. She then circumambulated the fire and, while thinking of the lotus feet of her husband, entered its flames. Purport. The entrance of a chaste wife into the flames of the pyre of her dead husband is known as Sahagamana, which means dying with the husband. The system of Sahagamana had been practiced in Vedic civilization from time immemorial. Even after the British period in India, this practice was rigidly observed, but soon it degraded to the point that even when the wife was not strong enough to enter the fire of her dead husband, the relatives would force her to enter. Thus, this practice had to be stopped. But even today, there are still some solitary cases where a wife will voluntarily enter the fire and die with her husband. Even after 1940, we personally knew of a chaste wife who died in this way. Verse 23. Vilokyanugatam sadvim prutum vira varam patim tustuvur varada devair deva patyana sahasra. Synonym. Vilokya by observing, anugatam dying after the husband, sadvim the chaste woman, Pruthum of King Pruthu, Veera Viram, the great warrior, Patim, husband, Tustuvu offered prayers, Varada, able to give benediction, Devai by the demigods, Deva Patyana, the wives of the demigods, Sahasra in thousands. Translation. After observing this brave act performed by the chaste wife Archie, the wife of the great King Prutu, many thousands of the wives of the demigods, along with their husbands, offered prayers to the queens, for they were very much satisfied. And end of translation there. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this chapter right now, Maharaj Prithu is going back home. The full details are given about how Maharaj Prithu and wife Archie left for the forest. This is like completely winding up the pastime. So this is towards the end. And then Maharaja Prithu, we saw how he completely, slowly, he started refraining from the food and water. And finally, he intentionally, like when the right time was there, he left his body. So that's what we saw in the previous verses. And then now in this three verses, actually, now it is just showing how Queen Archie responded, right? Yesterday, the couple verses also, we saw how Queen Archie, she was the ideal wife. Like all along when King Prithu was ruling, she was there by his side, supporting and doing everything. And now in the end, when he left to the forest and he was ready to give up I mean, give up in the sense like, completely leave this world. Also, she accompanied him, even though it was not a comfortable state being the queen, but she still accompanied him. And now, it's so beautiful is seeing like what is her reaction. So when she saw that he left, there was no signs or symptoms of life. So at that time, what happened? What was her reaction? She lamented for a little while. So that is important here, right? That word, how it is given here, vilapya. So it is like kinchit vilapya. Kinchit is very little. Vilapya is lamenting. So that's the verse here it is saying. So, and then it is the explanation is given further, right? So why is it that she lamented just very little? Because the first reason is that she understands the whole circle of life and death. And Srila Prabhupada explains it so nicely. Bhagavad Gita verse Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhira satranamuyati. When it is similar to like how a child grows into a man, goes into old man, the whole conversion, we can see that. Similarly, like that, the soul transmigrates from one body to another. The soul really never dies. And that's the higher truth, higher reality that we have learned from Bhagavad Gita. So similarly, like that, here Queen Archie understands the fact that he has already returned back to Godhead, completely wrapping up his pastime. So that's the reason why it is given that she lamented just a little bit. And then the other reason the acharyas are giving is that she also knew now she has responsibilities to perform. After that, we see in the next verse, right, that she made all the arrangements to offer oblations and lit the pyre and all of that. So when there are responsibilities also to be taken, then you continue. You can just sit and lament and not do anything. Although we know that we need that much amount of time, but then being the personality that Queen Archie is, being that higher, the great person she is, she continued on with her responsibility. And that's beautifully explained in the next verse that how she offered oblations. And it's also beautiful how Srila Prabhupada explains, right? The situation that she's in a forest with her husband and he passed away. So for a normal person, like a normal wife, a normal, it will be like a little bit scary to be alone in the forest and doing all of this. But so Srila Prabhupada is explaining about the position of Queen Archie and glorifying her, that how she, in spite of all of this, she offered obeisances to the demigods and then circumambulated the fire and then lit the flame, right? So I mean, that's also a huge thing to be able to do that necessary funerary functions, like also alone, being alone with her husband, and even understanding like the whole mourning process and doing to the next step and everything. So the other highlight here is also understanding that how a wife's duty, right? Like very clearly explaining that all along the company is given during the lifetime, like the ideal wife, chaste wife, all along the wife is there to support the spiritual growth of the husband. And then even when he dies also, if she's still there, right? See, look at how she did. She did that funeral pyre. And then the next step, what she did was she entered into the pyre herself. And that is explaining about the Sahagamana. That is explained like basically sati. That's what it is explaining about. So here in the Vedic scriptures, explanation is given about sati, right? Sahagamana, that a wife who's chaste and who is able to do that will be able to enter into the funeral pyre of her husband. But it is not a mandatory. It was never a mandatory thing in the Vedic scriptures that all the wives have to enter like that. So we can also see from the Vedic, in the past, like Mahabharata and different stories also, that it's not like King Dronacharya's wife. She did not enter. Even when Maharaj Pandu also passed away, Madri entered the fire, but Queen Kunti did not enter the fire because she had responsibility to perform, take care of the Pandavas. So like that, it was never a mandatory thing to enter into the to enter into the husband's funeral pyre when the husband passes away. However, if the wife willingly she would do it, then it was accepted. And also the reason being that for some of them, it was like the separation of the husband from the husband. The fire of that separation was greater than the separation, like if I would rather enter the fire, so when you compare that, so that's the reason where some of them entered. However, here Srila Prabhupada also explains that how Britishers, when they came on, they completely twisted this whole thing. They have done this to many of the Vedic philosophies, many of the Vedic, I guess, principles where they completely distorted what it was. And during that time, they took this and they said, "Oh, look, this is a must." And like at some point, also the wives were forced to enter into the funeral pyre, but that was completely distorted. As we can see from the Vedic scripture, it was a voluntary act and never a forced act for the wife to enter into the funeral pyre, like offers sati. So very nice explanation given in that too. And then the last verse, so 23 to 30, these verses are really describing about glorification of Queen Archie. That's what it is. And we can continue on from the future verses also. We'll see the glorification. But here it sees that you can see that the many thousands of the wives of demigods, along with their husbands, offered prayer to the queen. So, because of this act, how she beautifully offered all of this, and just for who she was, right? Queen Archie herself is that great personality, not just because she is the wife of King Prithu, but in herself, she was this great personality. And that is why the offerings are being given to the queen. So it's just very beautiful section. Also, like as I said, lesson learned for general people like us. Just kind of explains. Like I know that this is like a very high bar that I mean, normal people can't even think about achieving, but still, even little bit of that, if we can just kind of follow that, it is so important to be that pillar, to be that support, a wife's role, right? To be that support for the husband and support the spiritual growth. Now, it may look different from each of the couple. It will definitely look different, but whatever it is, to have that maturity, to have that emotional maturity and that knowledge to be able to support the husband's spiritual path while also growing spiritually herself, right? And that's really what it is. So no matter ups and down, no matter what happens, to be really staying strict with, like really following the principles and staying strictly on this path of Krishna consciousness. And of course, we always have Krishna's protection when we are doing the right thing. So I think those are just some of the realizations from reading these verses. Thank you so much, devotees, for giving me this opportunity. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnav